Much like everyone else in the past handful of days, I have been trying out the new 0.9 Convergence multiplayer update of last Epoch. Previously, about a year ago, I did give the game a very quick shot, and honestly, I bounced off of it pretty hard. Most of that was me kind of not really giving it too much of a chance, and part of that was the game feeling pretty janky. And I'm happy to say, after sticking with it this patch and really playing it a little bit longer, I really legitimately love this game. I want to just say up front, the developers never contacted me. Almost all of my playtime has been offline after streaming, and I really just kind of can't stop playing this game. The gameplay loop is, while simple, has really, really good fundamentals and a really good flow that is very satisfying. The too long didn't watch to me is this game is somewhere between Diablo 3 and Path of Exile. It strikes a very interesting middle ground where it has a lot of quality of life. As you can see from the visuals, it very, very much looks like Diablo 3, but in terms of the systems design and the depth, it is much more towards the Path of Exile style. The big thing to me is that the fundamentals of the game, the systems there, are really, really strong. I'm particularly impressed with the crafting system and the itemization, and I see a ton of potential for this game to stand head-to-head with Path of Exile, particularly as a palate cleanser after a really intense league. My approach to playing the game here is just doing it totally blind. I haven't looked up a single thing, gone to a single website, looked up any resources or guides or anything. I've even tried to avoid looking up too much in the in-game wiki, which is incredibly handy. I really wanted to see how much I could intuitively explore and try to come up with a build totally blind and see if I could figure out something that's pretty effective. And what you see in the background is me doing one of the end game 100 area level empowered monoliths. This is my first one actually at level 87. And I actually take down an end game boss of the empowered monolith, the first attempt, which you'll see in the background in a second. So yeah, if you're wondering if you should give this game a shot, if you want another ARPG that really strikes a sweet spot between Diablo 3 and PoE, I do highly recommend this game. With that said, it is still in beta. There are quite a number of bugs. They just added multiplayer. I've had a ton of fun actually playing with a friend of mine, but there are quite a few bugs that sometimes you'll lose your dungeon with the key and everything. Sometimes your character will teleport into outer space without any clothes on. All sorts of funny things, but they're not game-breaking enough to really detract from the fun that I've been having. So yeah, that's my overall summary. If you're interested in this game, give it a shot. The remainder of this video is a clip from the stream yesterday where I went over my understanding. At time of recording, it was about me having about 20 hours played in the game, but my understanding of all the systems in the game, my first impressions as a 20-hour player of the game coming from Path of Exile. How I think about the game, how I think about the game's systems, comparing it to Diablo 3 and Path of Exile, and the potential that I see in the future of this game. I genuinely hope that this game does very well. I see tons of potential. They have really good fundamentals. I just want to keep harping on how impressed I am, particularly by the crafting system. It really looks like they spent a lot of time looking at itemization and crafting across all sorts of games and coming up with their own flavor that just feels really good to engage with. If you guys are interested, let me know. I can make a video for the build that I'm playing right now. It's not refined or anything. I don't know what uniques or set items are really in the game besides what I've found, but it's pretty effective and it's getting the job done. Enjoy the rest of the video if you want a download of how the game works and all the systems, at least of my understanding as a 20-hour player. And I'm going to go get ready for the stream. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Goodbye. A basic idea of the story, you can see there's like time travel. Think like a little bit of like a Chrono Trigger thing going on where you go to the end of time, and typical type of thing. You go through all the acts and everything, and you get your passive points. Nothing too crazy. Where to start talking about the game? So my character is an acolyte. That's my base class, and so this is my skill tree right here. Basically, you see this vertical line that will start at the beginning. And as you allocate points, it'll unlock you know, there's two prerequisites for allocating any points. You have to have the number of dots allocated from the previous node. Right here, to allocate any points into Soul Aegis, I actually have to allocate 4 points into Dark Rituals. But also, I have to have this many number of points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right here. So I can't allocate any points into the second column until I have at least 5 points total in the tree. Nothing too complex with the tree, right? So you have to allocate the first points, and then you can allocate, you know, the next column as soon as you get that prerequisite. And then you need at least the number of dots for the leading nodes to get up to there, right? And then the other thing that you see at the bottom right here is these skills. You know, there's no skill gems or anything like that. Your class and then your ascendancy. I don't know if they're called ascendancies. Your mastery. I think maybe that's what they're called. So your base class has 4 or 5 different skills. I think everyone has like a mobility skill. You have some that will just unlock naturally as well with your level. So yeah, I got like Rip Blood, Summon Skeleton, Marrow Shards, Wandering Spirits. These ones are unlocked with the character level. And then these ones are unlocked with the passive points that I have to allocate. So the reason why that matters is if I want to use Infernal Shade, like I have my mastery points as well. And so I have my points, and like it's the same level of points that go into it, right? You get like 100 something points, for a level 100 character. There's a couple extra ones from like doing the quest. So like say 110 points, right? I could put fewer points into my Acolyte class, right? Like if I don't use any of these skills, I could actually, as you can see, I have very few points in my Acolyte class. But then I don't know where it is, like level 20 or level 30, then you pick your mastery. And then you choose either Necromancer or Lich. And I went Lich. Lich is kind of occultist, I guess. There's not that much synergy with curses, but she's kind of like the occultist class. Necromancer is, minions, right? You can see that I have allocated most of my passive points into the Lich mastery. If I want to use Infernal Shade, I have to put at least 20 points into the Acolyte class. Now, I don't use Infernal Shade or Spirit Plague. Respecking in this game and all that is actually really, really easy. You just talk to this brain person right here, and it just costs gold. I could just talk to her, unspec them. It costs gold. It costs, the more that you unspec, the more gold that it costs. But gold, it like other game, like non-PoE games, gold, you have gold as like your general currency for doing stuff. Feels like the gold economy, at least for now, has some pretty big sinks. So you can end up with millions of gold, but you can spend millions of gold really, really easily as well. So it feels like they have that pretty well tuned. Respecking your passive skills is very, very easy. I spec'd into Lich, which is all about necrotic damage, generally. Necrotic or poison damage, or you can convert that to physical damage as well. Speaking of damage types, this game has a lot of them. Fire, lightning, cold, physical, poison, necrotic, and void. So if you thought maxing out 4 resistances in Path of Exile was a lot, welcome to 7 different resistances. I have a decent amount of res, like 75 is the max as well in this game. So yeah, when you unlock your mastery, you also get a mastery skill just for that ascendancy, or that mastery by itself. You can either get Summon Wraith, which is basically Summon Reaper. You get your own like very powerful Wraith, or you can turn into a Reaper yourself, which is what mine is. I will say that the passive points, the ones for your class, are pretty unimpactful. Almost all of these are take less damage, do more damage, get some defensive shield, get more crit chance, get some attack, cast, and movement speed. None of these are particularly transformational. There's no like keystones that really change your build. And I think that's like that extra oomph that I think is missing for me, is those transformational things that allow like extreme skill expression or, customization for the player. That's like currently missing for me, right? Just like when everything is just, more damage, less damage, stuff like that. It's a little less interesting, but I think it's a good foundation. There's your passive points. And I think this is like one of the cool things they did. There's your passive points right here, or sorry, your passive points right here. But then you have all of your skills with masteries. And, this is taking what Diablo 3 did to the next level. Diablo 3, you choose your handful of skills that you have equipped. And then those handful of skills, you can choose a couple runes that are moderately transformational, but they're kind of like not huge, right? Now, the thing with your skills here is you can only equip 5 skills at once. It's a fine foundation. It's the standard ARPG thing. I'm used to Path of Exile where I have a whole 8 plus 7. I can have 15 different skills, right? In Path of Exile. And each one of them can be dramatically customized. The cool thing here is each skill has its own skill tree. And these skills, while my criticism of the passive tree was that nothing was particularly transformational, my praise of the skill passive tree is that these are fairly transformational. And I think that this is where you really find build expression. There's uniques and everything as well that have some pretty cool stuff. But you find a lot more build expression here. They have XP as well, right? I think all of mine are leveled up right now. But your skills have XP. They have their own skill tree. And, this is in Diablo 2 has this, right? But they have their own, you can unspec them. You have to re-level them. You can unspec, but you have to re-level it. But it accelerates it. It's not a big deal. And these are pretty transformational, right? Like, so Soul Feast right here, just to show my main skill, is by default, Soul Feast is a single target skill. And it requires the target to be cursed. But by putting points into the upper left side of the tree right here, it no longer requires the target to be cursed. And instead of having a single target limit that then can be expanded, you can make it attack multiple targets. It's now a cone in front of my character. And then I can put more points into it to make that cone bigger. I can apply frailty to the enemies to make them do less damage. Where usually this is like a little single target skill. These skill points allow a lot of customization to really set up your build in a way that you can customize yourself and play them very, very differently, right? Very similar to Diablo 2, you can get plus to level of your skills, which gives you additional skill points that you can allocate for your skills. And then you have your idols, which is like the charms from Diablo 2, but it actually has a dedicated idol box, unlike Diablo 2, so you don't fill your inventory with a bunch of trash, which I very much appreciate. So you can customize your build with, you know, all sorts of stuff. Like I do damage while transformed, get a little extra res, like extra regen, stuff like that. This is one of the 2 endgame systems, the only 2 that I know of anyway. This is the monolith system, which basically there's these different eras, these different platforms that you go on. And then within that platform, I'll show you guys, within this, it has like a web of kind of like synthesis. It'll have a web of like kind of nodes that are connected, and you can actually see the loot that you'll get. And this is basically like the mapping system. There's all sorts of different, you know, complexities where you can ramp up, you can push the difficulty by ramping the corruption. You can re-roll the whole web, stuff like that. You want to keep doing these nodes to up this stability, and then you can do these quest missions, which will culminate in a boss fight that then gives you a blessing. And the blessings are basically an additional inventory item right here. And looks like there's a total of 10 of them. And they give you really nice passive bonuses. This is like one of the end game systems. You want to just farm for better blessings that are well rolled. Like you can't roll over them, you can't craft them or anything. You just have to like farm that monolith until you get the one that you're looking for. This is what you spend most of the time doing, and then the other half of the time you spend doing dungeons. So basically what I'm doing is I have there's a randomly generated quest here that says slay enemies to locate the Savage Gate. The number one thing for me is the density is kind of low in general. Like there's a few zones that you'll see some pretty good density, but the density here is pretty low in general. And you're just kind of like going around killing the monsters. It's very relaxing, but do this quest, and sometimes you have to like find a spire to kill or something like that. Yeah, these are shrines, very similar to PoE shrines. So I had to find this objective, seal the Savage Gate. So I just click on the gate, and then I just sit here and wait until enough monsters die that it's sealed. That's it. I just have to kill enough monsters to teleport out. Now, I will say that there's a lot of really good quality life stuff in this game. Really good. Like the gold is auto pickup. You just walk over it, and it'll AoE pick up a lot of things. You can just press T to summon a portal right away, or you can even click this portal button. And it's instant. There's no cast time. I can just press T and click, and I'm out. I'm immediately out. There's no teleporting or anything. And then I can just open up, get the loot, and then it AoE picks up shards and everything like that, and then I'm on to the next. I think that loop is very clean, and is actually, I'm glad that they focus on that quality life. I think it's really good. Yeah, really good quality life. I can also sort the items in my inventory with the sort item button. I can also click transfer items, right? So there's a lot of crafting material, like a lot of them. You can see I have thousands of them. I can just click transfer crafting items, and they immediately go into my stash, and it pulls them out of my inventory. It's really, really clean. In-game wiki, yep, I have referenced the wiki a little bit. So the loot filter is freaking sick. And we were actually just talking about the Gambit system in Final Fantasy XII. And this reminds me a lot of that. So basically, you have these cascading filters where the number one filter is the highest priority. It's like the high pass filter. And so what you do is you put your lowest priority ones of like, hey, I only want to show these mods, or I want to show all of these mods. I want to hide all rare items. And then I want to hide all normal items, and then all magic items. Then I want to recolor all items that have certain mods. And then I want to recolor certain mods on top of that are even higher priority. With that priority system, I want to hide 11 different base types that I don't care about. And then even higher priority to that, I want to hide all non-acolyte items because it doesn't apply to my class. And then I want to show all unique items because I'm hiding everything else, right? There's so many more rules that I want to add and make it more robust. But like this has been good enough for now. I'm sure there's probably some stuff that I've missed or I haven't highlighted, but it's worked out pretty well so far, and it's pretty cool. You get these keys, they're just random drops, and you get these keys that allow you to do these different dungeons. And apparently they have 4 tiers. I'm going to do tier 2. I don't think I'm ready for tier 3. That have ramping difficulty, and you can see what you get for additional rewards. All right, so you enter the dungeon, and the dungeons have like very MMO-light mechanics. But basically the mechanic here, I have this currency in the lower left, Soul Embers. I get 1 for each monster that I kill. Every time that I press D, it'll change the shield that's around my character. I think it gives me immunity, yeah. So right now I am immune to necrotic damage. But if I press D, Now I'm immune to fire damage. So it's like very MMO light mechanics. So before I walk over the fire ground, I make myself immune to fire, and then I walk over it and I don't take any damage, right? And then like when I see a monster queuing up necrotic damage, like I'll shift the shield, right? And then the really cool thing here is that I gotta set up my build here. The really cool thing is that it's kind of like a press your luck thing a little bit. And I think they didn't lean into the complexity of like what is possible here enough, because it's a little too simplistic. I see a lot of potential. It's like this currency at the end is for like an uber gamble. So there's a character that you can gamble with, like think Gwenin, right? And you can spend the soul embers to gamble to get like really good exalted items. And exalted items, right, are these purple ones. So you want to kill as many monsters as possible while trying to press D as little as possible so that you have as much currency for the gambling at the end. Like that's where the reward is. Problem is you don't really have to press D that often. At least so far. I haven't had to press it very much at all. There we go. We did it. So dungeon is done. All right. And then this is the dungeon mechanic. And every dungeon has a different loot mechanic, which is pretty cool. It's very creative. This one is a gambling mechanic where, like I said, I use the soul embers that I gathered from killing the monsters to gamble. And so I can choose from the different base types that he shows me. It's just it's a full gamble. We have no idea what it's going to drop. I think my catalyst might be one of my weakest items. This one's it's tough. All my items are decent for what they are. I think that my relic is definitely my weakest item. Let's see if we can do better. So you can see this is going to cost 110. Relics are very expensive. You know, just like PoE, your jewelry and your relics are the most expensive items. Nope, not good. Ooh, Ashes of Orcarian. Unfortunately, I am not doing physical damage. But if I were doing physical damage and legendary potential, yeah, I have legendary potential on this ring. Legendary potential, as far as I know, allows you to add like an additional stat to a unique. Like basically craft a unique. And there we go. That's one of the dungeons. Pretty cool. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about crafting. So crafting, I think, they did an incredible job with the crafting. I'm truly impressed. So you access crafting by pressing F. It's just always there. And let's see. Let's find an item to craft. So the big thing that you want to be looking at here is the forging potential on the item. Let's find a bad item real quick, guys. I don't want to craft on anything. Oh, actually, you know, I can just go to the gambler. And there's always gambling. This guy's basically Gwenin. Let's try to find a good catalyst. Boom. Hook me up. Is any base that drops, and this is kind of like the beautiful thing about it, is PoE drops so many items, and the crafting is so... You're looking for such specific things and intentional crafting that outside of solo self-found, you basically just hide everything. And I think there's two real big things that they do here that are awesome. The number one thing is that all items drop identified. There is no identifying your items. On top of that, you can set up your loot filter. This is my blue one right here, where I chose the affixes that I care about, right? Very specifically, I care about the level of certain skills. And then I have this one as well, where I care about certain mods like necrotic damage, maybe poison damage, stuff like that, depending on what my build is, that I highlight different colors that I want. And so I only see rare items that drop that potentially, and you could make this very savvy, but potentially are a good base that I would want to craft on. And it's just like, it's very cool where your loot filter is already doing the initial work of finding the base that you want to craft with. And then, so you can just mouse over the thing, see if you want to craft with it. And so all rares that drop potentially have value, and you can make your filter already show them if you care about them. So anyway, you find an item that has a cool, like, oh, it's got one really good stat or it's got two really good stats that you care about, and it's just got one mod that you want to try to remove. And you see it as a really good crafting base. The other thing that you're going to look at here is the forging potential. All of these have really bad forging potential. Like if you gamble items, they do. You see that third line right there in the implicits, forging potential. That's basically like a crafting durability. You can always do more to the item while it has forging potential. So that's the thing that you want to be careful about. Every time you do a craft, it will consume forging potential, although there's a chance that it doesn't. And the amount of forging potential that is consumed is random. So if we put the skull in right here, we put in my offhand right here, you can see you can have 2 prefixes and 2 suffixes by default. You can fracture mods, which basically seals them off. You can seal the mod that pulls it out of the pool. And then so you can have a 5 mod item, which is really cool. You can fracture a mod off and end up with a 5 mod item. I don't know if you can fracture multiple, but that's not a thing I've tried yet. But you can see I have my 2 prefixes here and my 2 suffixes. And you see I have 1 suffix and an open suffix. Your options here, while I have forging potential, I can still craft. You can see that, like I said earlier, it goes from tier 1 to tier 5. You can choose to just upgrade the tier. Like this is your default thing, like non-modified, non-nothing, right? You can just choose to upgrade my tier. Now, we have these materials. Really nice, really clean, nice UI here as well for the materials. This is the general thing that you're picking up for your crafting material is there's these affix mods, and there's different rarities. There's some that are really rare. Movement speed for your boots, unfortunately, is very rare. I've only found 2 of them so far. You know, you find these crafting materials that say, hey, I just want to add cold res to my boots. And then when you add cold res to the item, it always adds it by default as tier 1. And so as long as you have enough forging potential and you have enough of your cold res affixes, you can just make that tier 5, right? If this thing had 30, 40 forging potential, I knew, and if I had 5 cold res mods, I could just bring this directly up to tier 5 cold res if I knew that's what I needed on the item. And that's like how simple it starts off, which is just beautiful, right? I have a good base, it's got damage, it's got life, and I just want to add tier 5 cold res, or at least tier 3 plus. It's got enough forging potential, I can just do that. So I can just take this base, click cold res, and then I click add affix right here. Boom, it used 7 forging potential. So you can see the cost here as well. It's a random cost from 1 to 10. So you know how much you're going to potentially spend before you do it. And so you can see we got tier 1 cold res. It starts off at the base. We got +8 cold res. If you hold control and alt, just like PoE, holding alt, you can see the tier of your mods and you can see the range. You can also divine your mods with runes. These are runes, glyphs and runes. Okay. As long as you have at least 1 forging potential, I think you can always do it anyway, even if you don't have enough to go within the range. I added my tier 1 cold res. Now, here's the next thing you can do. To modify what you're going to be doing here is you have these glyphs, which are pretty cool. So Glyph of Hope is like your default. You're basically always going to be using Glyph of Hope. This says it modifies the outcome of the craft, granting it a 25% chance to have no forging potential cost. So 1 out of 4 times, you won't consume any forging potential. So you basically always want to have a very large stock. I have 81 Glyphs of Hope. And so this way you have a 25% chance to not consume any of that forging potential. So easier to get up to that tier 5 mod. The other ones are Glyph of Chaos, just re-rolls the affix. You can only do this while you're upgrading the tier of a mod. So if I didn't like cold res, maybe for example, the item came with cold res, but I really want fire res, you could risk it by using the Glyph of Chaos. Maybe you have cold res and you don't need any res and you just want it to be anything else. You can use this to hopefully get a mod that you want. This one's very risky because it's a very large pool of mods that you can get. But if you just have like leftover forging potential, you want to change a mod to something usable, you can do that. Then there's the Glyph of Order, which modifies the outcome of a craft when upgrading an affix. This one's really, really cool. This is how I got +3 vitality as an additional mod on my my body armor right here. It came with +3 vitality, it came with tier 2 vitality, but I didn't want that as a prefix. I think this body armor came with those 2 health suffixes, but I wanted to add Wandering Spirits and Reaper Form as my prefixes. I had a prefix. Vitality is a prefix. I wanted to get that out of there, but I didn't want to risk a random annul. So I used the Glyph of Order to try to seal that vitality, pull it out of the pool, and then I have a free prefix to add. And that's what I did. So I don't know what the random chance is for doing this, but when you upgrade with the Glyph of Order, it will actually pull it out of the pool. It'll put it like down here, and it will become basically fractured from Path of Exile. But it's fractured and out of the pool, so you can have 2 more suffixes, which is really cool. There's crafting crit as well. I hit that, yeah. So sometimes when you're crafting, you can get a lucky crit where effectively it'll boost it even more tiers. Which is pretty cool. Sorry, I was saying the wrong one. Despair is the ceiling. Order, so if you have a top rolled mod, for example, if the mod is between 1 and 10 health, and it's 10 health, and then you take it to tier 2, and then it goes from 11 to 20, it'll be, I believe this is how it works. It'll be 20% instead of potentially re-rolling it as somewhere else within the order. So if you have like a top rolled tier 4 health and you want to have top rolled tier 5 health, you can use the Glyph of Order to guarantee that you don't have to divine the item to go for the top roll afterwards. Those are the glyphs. Generally, you just always leave hope on because you always want to have you want to hope for a chance to not consume any crafting potential when you're doing that. That's your general crafting. Is you're just you can add a mod and then you can just click on this up arrow, use your Glyph of Hope, and then you upgrade the tier. That's your starting crafting. And then you're always going to use your Glyph of Hope when you have it to make sure that, to give you a more chance to have more forging potential. Now, the next level on top of this, we can clear this out, is using the runes. Are very, very cool. So Rune of Shattering is basically destroy an item and get a random number of affix shards containing the powers. So this is why on my loot filter, for example, right here, recolor all mods with these 7 affixes. When I see a blue item, I know that it has one of the level of one of my skills. So I can level up my skills, right? And so the blue items are the level of the skills that I'm using on my character because I want to have these mods that give me plus level as well as, additional bonuses to my skills. So what I do is I just get these mods, A of all, maybe they're a good base that I want to craft on, or B of all at the very least, I can put them in here to shatter them and then get affix shards so then I can put that mod on a different item. I can get those affixes. For example, if I really need cold or void res affixes to craft on a different item, I can use this Rune of Shattering to destroy it, and I got a cold resistance shard. Now, it is random, and sometimes you'll put in like a really good item that has good stuff and you won't get what you wanted, but welcome to some RNG, right? The other runes are Rune of Refinement, rerolls all affixes within their tiers. This is a divine orb. Rune of Removal, removes a random affix. Also, you get the shards for it as well, which is nice. It is an annulment orb. I have bricked a number of good items, removing good mods from them, but one good prefix and one bad prefix. You can do that, or you can use the Glyph of Despair to seal it so you can, get another free prefix, right? So this is just an annulment orb. Then we have Rune of Discovery. This one's really cool. Adds random tier 1 affixes to all empty affix slots. So this is just a full YOLO. Now, the really cool thing is it does not cost forging potential. So if you have 2 good prefixes and 2 empty suffixes, and you don't really care what the suffixes are, fill them up and not use forging potential, you can use this to fill those suffixes and try to get, hopefully you get something usable, right? And I've used this a number of times, which is a very cool item. Basically a random exalt that doesn't take any potential. And then the Rune of Shaping rerolls your implicits. It's a blessing orb, right? Just rerolls the values of your implicits, no big deal. Rune of Ascendance, I have 4 of these. We can use a couple right now. Changes your item into a unique or set item of the same type. Early on, I had my helmet and my belt very, very early on. This is really good for my build. And so I equipped them, and then I did look up on the wiki. I was like, what is the third piece in this body armor? Because you can't tell. It doesn't tell you what the full set is. It was a pair of gloves. Whenever I had a Rune of Ascendance, I grabbed the pair of gloves, and I tried to make my set armor. I didn't. These eventually dropped, but one rule is it can't become a boss drop unique. That makes sense. And then Rune of Creation, this is a mirror. Duplicates the item, but reduces the forging potential of both the original and the copy to 0. Like I said, there's a lot of additional stuff, right? There's the legendary potential, which lets us add really big mods onto stuff. There's these exalted items that drop really, really high tier stuff, which you can still roll. You can still randomly annul them and all sorts of stuff, but they're drop only. It makes rare item drops particularly valuable. You see that purple on the ground, you're like, oh, maybe it's really good for my build. Really cool system. A lot of depth to it, right? I actually, when I first saw this, I was like, I can just add mods. I can just do whatever. But it really strikes a great sweet spot where there's enough risk behind your choices. Like nothing is guaranteed. There's enough risk. There's enough randomness where it feels really good to hit something, and you can influence the outcomes by, being a little bit savvy and making smart decisions. Yeah, it's really cool. I really appreciate the crafting system. I think it's really, really good foundation, great systems. I am very excited for the future of this game.